In 2021, a startup walked into the future of farming and convinced the world it had arrived. It had a tractor. A beautiful electric autonomous tractor, with cameras, sensors, and artificial intelligence baked into every bolt. It could drive itself through a vineyard at midnight. It could read soil conditions in real time. It could, according to its founders, replace the most expensive and unreliable variable in modern agriculture: human labor. The company was called Monarch Tractor, and for a brief, luminous moment, it looked like the most important agricultural technology company on Earth. Investors poured in. Headlines followed. The valuation climbed. And then, almost without warning, the lights went out. $240 million. Gone. Not lost in a market crash, not stolen in a fraud. Burned through a company that genuinely believed it was building the future. And discovered, too late, that belief alone cannot harvest a field. This is the autopsy of Monarch Tractor. And what we find inside will tell you everything about the gap between Silicon Valley ambition and the brutal, unforgiving reality of American agriculture. Monarch Tractor was founded in 2018 by Praveen Penmetsa, Mark Schwager, and Carlo Mondavi. Yes, that Mondavi, the grandson of Robert Mondavi, the man who built California wine into a global empire. Carlo brought legitimacy. He brought vineyards. He brought a name that opened doors in Napa Valley boardrooms that most startups could never reach. The pitch was elegant in its simplicity. American agriculture was facing a labor crisis. The H-2A visa program, which allows farms to hire temporary foreign workers, had become a bureaucratic nightmare. Labor costs were rising. Workers were aging out of the industry. And the farms that depended on seasonal human hands were quietly bleeding. Monarch said, "We have the answer." Their flagship product, the MKV tractor, was genuinely impressive. It was fully electric, with a range of up to 10 hours on a single charge. It was equipped with cameras and sensors that could operate autonomously, or semi-autonomously, through GPS-mapped fields. It could be monitored remotely through a tablet. And it was designed specifically for specialty crop farming. The vineyards, orchards, and berry fields that are too delicate and too irregular for the massive autonomous systems being built for corn and soybean operations in the Midwest. In 2021, Monarch raised a $61 million Series A round. By 2022, they had raised a total of over $140 million. By the time the final funding rounds closed, the number would approach $240 million. Investors included AGCO Corporation, one of the largest agricultural equipment manufacturers in the world, as well as Yamaha Motor Ventures and a constellation of venture capital firms who saw precision agriculture as the next trillion-dollar frontier. Here is the number that made everyone lean forward. The global precision agriculture market was projected to reach $43 billion by 2030. Monarch wasn't just selling tractors, it was selling a subscription, a data platform, a future where every acre of farmland generated continuous intelligence, and farmers paid monthly for the privilege of accessing it. The press loved it. Forbes covered it. AgWeb covered it. Carlo Mondavi became the face of a movement. Photogenic, passionate, and deeply connected to the land, in a way that most tech founders simply are not. This wasn't a kid from Stanford who had never touched soil. This was a man who had grown up between vineyard rows. And that authenticity made the story irresistible. But underneath the press releases, the cracks were forming before the ink dried on the first check. The first problem was the customer. Monarch had built a product for specialty crop farmers, a demographic that is, by nature, conservative, cash-constrained, and deeply skeptical of technology that hasn't been proven across multiple growing seasons. These are not early adopters. These are people whose entire livelihood depends on a harvest that comes once a year. They do not beta test. The MK5 tractor was priced at approximately $58,000 to $65,000, competitive with comparable diesel tractors, but only if you factored in long-term fuel and labor savings that required years to materialize. And the subscription model for the AI and data platform added ongoing costs that many small and mid-sized farms simply could not absorb. Here is a pattern interrupt that should stop you cold. As of 2023, the average American farm generated a net income of roughly $109,000 per year. Monarch was asking those same farms to invest in a technology ecosystem, hardware, software, connectivity infrastructure that required not just capital, but trust in a company that had existed for less than 5 years. The second crack was technical. Autonomous operation in specialty crop environments is extraordinarily difficult. Vineyards are not flat. Rows are not perfectly uniform. Canopy conditions change. Soil composition shifts. The edge cases, the situations that a human driver handles instinctively, multiplied faster than the software team could address them. Early customers reported reliability issues. The autonomous features that had been the centerpiece of the pitch required more human supervision than the marketing had implied. And the third crack, perhaps the most damaging, was the business model itself. Monarch was trying to be a hardware company, a software company, and a data company simultaneously. Each of those is a different business with different margins, different sales cycles, and different organizational DNA. Trying to build all three at once, with venture capital on a 5-year clock, was an almost impossible ask. The runway was burning. And the harvest wasn't coming fast enough. By late 2023 and into 2024, the signals were unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Monarch had delivered tractors, real tractors, to real farms. That is not nothing. Many startups in this space never shipped a single unit. But the volume was insufficient to generate the revenue needed to sustain a company of Monarch's size and ambition. Reports emerged of layoffs. Key engineering and leadership personnel began departing. The company, which had once projected aggressive growth targets, went quiet, in ways that startups only go quiet when the conversations happening internally are ones no one wants to make public. Consider this. Monarch had raised $240 million. For context, John Deere, the dominant force in agricultural equipment, spends approximately $1.7 billion per year on research and development alone. Monarch was trying to compete in a capital-intensive, relationship-driven, slow-moving industry with a fraction of that firepower, and none of the dealer network, service infrastructure, or brand trust that John Deere had spent 186 years building. AGCO, one of Monarch's most prominent investors, had its own autonomous and precision agriculture ambitions. The strategic alignment that had made the investment attractive began to look more complicated as AGCO's own priorities shifted and the market for electric autonomous tractors proved slower to develop than the most optimistic projections had suggested. The company did not announce a dramatic bankruptcy. There was no single press conference where a founder stood at a podium and admitted failure. Instead, Monarch Tractor did what many failed startups do in the end. It faded. Operations wound down. The website went quiet. The social media channels, once filled with gleaming images of the MKV rolling through golden vineyard rows at dusk, stopped updating. $240 million had entered the company. And the company had vanished. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating sound of a door closing on an empty office. The tractors that had been delivered to farms still exist. They still sit in equipment sheds in Napa and Sonoma and the Central Valley. But the software updates have stopped. The support infrastructure is gone. And the farmers who believed in the vision are left holding hardware that is slowly becoming an expensive, very heavy monument to a promise that couldn't be kept. So what killed Monarch Tractor? Not incompetence, not fraud, not a single catastrophic decision made in a single boardroom on a single afternoon. What killed Monarch Tractor was a collision. A collision between Silicon Valley's timeline and agriculture's timeline. And those two timelines are not compatible. Lesson 1. The customer defines the product, not the pitch deck. Monarch built a product that impressed investors and journalists, but the actual customer, the farmer, the vineyard manager, the orchard operator, needed something different. They needed reliability above innovation. They needed service networks above software updates. They needed a company that would be there in year 7, not just year 1. Monarch optimized for the raise. They should have optimized for the relationship. Lesson 2. Hardware is a brutal business. And hardware plus software plus data is 3 brutal businesses. The subscription model that made Monarch's pitch so compelling to venture capital was, in practice, nearly impossible to execute simultaneously with building and shipping physical machinery. Every dollar spent on software development was a dollar not spent on manufacturing quality, dealer relationships, or field support. You cannot be everything at once. The companies that survive pick a lane. Lesson 3. Timing is not just strategy, it is survival. The market for electric autonomous tractors will exist. It may already be emerging. But Monarch arrived before the infrastructure, before the regulatory clarity, before the farmer psychology had shifted far enough to support mass adoption. Being early in a slow-moving industry is functionally identical to being wrong. The graveyard of agriculture technology is full of companies that were right about the destination and wrong about the departure time. And lesson 4, perhaps the most uncomfortable one. Celebrity and credibility are not the same thing. Carlo Mondavi's name opened doors. It generated press. It gave Monarch a story that resonated emotionally. But a famous name cannot fix a unit economics problem. It cannot accelerate a farmer's willingness to trust new technology. And it cannot extend a runway when the capital has been consumed and the revenue has not arrived. $240 million. Hundreds of employees who believed in the mission. Dozens of farmers who took a chance on a vision. And a fleet of electric tractors sitting silent in equipment sheds across California, waiting for software updates that will never come. That is the autopsy of Monarch Tractor. A company that was not evil, not reckless, not dishonest. Just too early, too ambitious, and too undercapitalized to survive the distance between the future it imagined and the present it had to sell. If this investigation made you think differently about where technology meets reality, subscribe to Autopsy of a Billion, where we dissect the companies that raised hundreds of millions, captured the world's attention, and then disappeared. On this channel, you'll find full autopsies of WeWork, Theranos, Juicero, and dozens of other billion-dollar collapses, each one a masterclass in what not to do. Every failure has a lesson. We find it. Now, here is the question we leave you with. Was Monarch Tractor a visionary company that ran out of time? Or was it a Silicon Valley story dressed in overalls, sold to investors who never truly understood the soil they were betting on? Drop your autopsy verdict in the comments. We read every one.